WNN.
Hi, this is Morgan Freeman. Has anyone ever said, "You're the picture of health"? You look healthy and you feel fine. But that may not be the full picture. Colorectal cancer is the second leading cancer killer of men and women over 50. Doesn't always cause symptoms, but it can be prevented. Get screened. Make sure you are the picture of health.
A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Peter Herrick was a 34-year-old carpenter when he joined the Navy Reserve. Peter's wife, Diana.
They were deployed to build schools and bases and to assist the Marines.
When the mortar round hit, I was completely knocked out. I didn't wake up until 6 days later.
Paralyzed veteran, Senior National Service Officer Raymond Bruce.
I saw Pete when he was at his worst. He didn't know if he was going to live to be able to see his daughter graduate from high school.
Raymond knew that I needed help figuring out where do we go from here.
We not only represent the veteran, but we represent the whole family.
11 months we stayed in the hospital down in Tampa.
We advocate, we educate, and we process claims through the VA, and we follow that claim from the beginning to the end.
Without Paralyzed Veterans of America, I really honestly believe I'd still be in the hospital.
You can help our paralyzed veterans. To learn more, visit pva.org, a public service of Paralyzed Veterans of America.
This is the sound of a brand new outdoor grill being hurled off a 20-story building. Now a stylish glass coffee table. An electric guitar. These are the things you could enjoy, all cast into oblivion. Because when you throw away money on wasted electricity, you throw away everything you could have bought with it. Visit EnergySavers.gov and get tips on how to save energy and money. Then do things like switch to Energy Star light bulbs or Energy Star appliances, and you could save hundreds of dollars a year. So this doesn't happen to the recliner you've had your eye on, or this to the treadmill on your wish list, or this to the shiny new bike your kid's been asking for. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
Talk 1470 is WWNN Pompano Beach and 95.3 FM W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
The following message is sponsored by the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
Natural disasters can be unexpected and devastating to your home or property. If your home or property is damaged and needs repairs, it's important to use only Florida licensed contractors. Remember to check their references, get everything in writing, and don't pay up front. To verify your contractors are licensed, contact the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation online at myfloridalicense.com. That's myfloridalicense.com.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel Brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening. It's Monday night at 9 o'clock. That means it's time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. My name is Ricky Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a certified sexuality educator and clinical sexologist. And proud big brother.
Thank you very much. Always great to be with you.
Indeed. And welcome home.
Thank you. Yes, I traveled. I got on a plane, so I got the sinus thing that happens every time I get on a plane. So sorry if I'm nasally tonight. If you're listening on the radio, we're in South Florida on 1470 AM or 95.3 FM, and you can call in. The lines will be open tonight. Please call in, ask your questions, join the conversation, whatever's on your mind. That number is 888-565-1470.
And if somebody was interested in counseling or therapy and wanted to get a hold of you,
Terrific.
Privately,
Thank
let's
you.
go ahead and put that out right now.
Okay, I can be reached at 561-809-1080 or at modernsextherapy.com.
And certainly if anybody wanted to contact the station or get a hold of us through the show or our Facebook page.
That's right. We're
Sex
also
Talk with the Siegel
streaming
Brothers.
live on Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook, welcome. Hello. Thank you for joining us. And feel free to use that little send email button on the Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers Facebook page. You can send us a question that way. The show will be running on the page, and they're also archived on YouTube. You can catch up on old shows and get all your questions answered.
Yeah, and definitely send us some ideas as well. If anybody has any thoughts on what you would like us to talk about or some issues you would like us to address, in addition to just having questions, we'd be happy to do that.
Also want to get in a plug for Modern Sex Therapy Institute, training institute. We're in 5 cities now and hoping to grow. To train, I work with Rachel Needle, West Palm Beach psychologist and sex therapist, and Larry, of course, is part of our very esteemed faculty. We're honored and privileged to have some of the best names in the field, and we train psychotherapists to do sex therapy. You'd think most people might think it's part of the training for all therapists, and as we know, as we complain about all the time.
Right. Anybody that has listened to this show knows that is not true.
Hardly ever. Couples counselors don't learn about sex. Penis and vagina doctors don't learn about sex. Psychologists don't learn about sex.
Well, why do we have to? Because sex is just one of those things that just magically fixes itself.
That's right.
Once people feel better.
If you work on the communication, the sex will take care of itself.
Exactly.
That was a credo for years among marriage and family therapists. And of course, it ain't true. And they knew it too.
Sure. It was just a nice avoidance.
Yeah.
You know, and the way a lot of therapists do is like, well, you have to build up to talking about sex. You have to build trust, and you have to get to that point. You can't just jump right into it. Well, yeah, you can, and you should.
Well, yeah. I mean,
especially if that's what they're there for.
Of course. There's been this criticism, which, well, at face value is kind of ridiculous to say that sex therapists focus too much on sex. Like, duh.
Yeah.
It's
and,
sex therapy.
And gynecologists are just too vaginally obsessed.
But, you know, the criticism is that it's too focused on sex without addressing relational issues and intergenerational issues. You know, you can tell
Which is, first of all, it's just
where
not
that
true.
criticism comes from.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
We can't ignore those things.
In fact, I think sex therapists generally do a better job at addressing those contextual issues than most other kind of therapists.
Yeah.
Because we're really the only ones that have that broad base of knowledge and training. We're really the only ones that have to address the multitude of contexts that sex exists in a relationship.
Sure.
And even not in a relationship.
Yeah, I guess it's a fair criticism, though, and a recent change in the requirements to be certified as a sex therapist, at least by ASECT, that people have clear training in couples counseling. And it's odd, just as sex is conspicuously absent from most training programs. Oddly, a lot of counseling programs don't get into couples work as deeply as they should. Group work, unfortunately, is also a dying art. It's hard to find really good groups.
Well, what do we need groups for? We have 12-step programs.
Hey! Wow, yeah. It's amazing how people still think that's therapy.
Right.
I mean, not knocking them if it works, great, but they're support groups. They're
right,
fellowships.
at best.
You know, it's like going to church.
Pretty
which is
much,
really
and
not
people go
about
kind of
God.
for the same reasons.
Yeah, it's about, hey, how you doing? We missed you last week. Where you been?
Yeah, and again, we know, and there's research that shows that, you know, again, going to church, the real benefit is that social connection.
Yeah, which of course we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's vital. There's no question about that. But it really is the dynamic. You know, if you're an individual in a relationship, then you're only half the story no matter what's going on. And that's something that, again, we do talk about a lot, sometimes getting a lot of heat for it, because if we're talking about these sort of sort of victim predator type of relationships, which is often how it's pretty much characterized. If somebody feels spurned,
you're right.
You know, they're immediately a victim, and the person that hurt them or betrayed them is immediately a perpetrator. It's an instant
or at least
dynamic.
a villain. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. Even therapists struggle with that, like dealing with affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody should check out the book, The State of Affairs, the latest offering from our friend and brilliant colleague, Esther Perel.
Mm-hmm.
And also Marty Klein's work.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
there's
I love
a lot
that
of good
question,
stuff out there.
Who owns the relationship after an affair?
After an affair, exactly.
And usually it's the quote, cheated on.
Well, yeah, it is the identified victim, and the other person is even more rhetorically and figuratively, but nonetheless geographically altered because they are moved into the proverbial doghouse.
Yeah, the cheater.
Right. So it's sort of like, let's fix this relationship with you sleeping in the backyard and me not saying a word to you, and you basically just having to bide your time until I deign to let you back in.
Decide.
And that'll
You're
fix
right.
the relationship.
Yeah, or to sit at the back door scratching on the screen and panting.
Yeah.
It's a mess. And how could not? I mean, of course, it's understandable. Everybody gets it, and we're not defending extramarital affairs because it's a betrayal. It's a broken trust. But that typical reaction to it, even by the therapist, kind of reduces the odds of that couple being lovers again.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because everybody's so into their role.
It prevents
you
resolution.
You hurt me, so you have to pay your dues.
Right.
You know, even murderers are told how long they have to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And when they serve their time, they're let out.
Right.
Told they have served their time. Couples who, someone who transgresses in a relationship sometimes has a worse than a life sentence. They have an unknown sentence.
Well, or it is known and it is a life sentence, and it's very sort of upfront. The partner who's really in charge is upfront about the fact that I'm not letting you leave. I'm going to keep you here. We're going to stay in this relationship, and I'm going to make every waking moment of the rest of your life miserable.
Why do people stay? I swear, as a therapist, I don't get why so many people, I guess I don't know, this perception that they have to stay. It seems very outdated, like old notions about divorce being so devastating for the kids that you had to stay for the kids.
Well, I think, and in some ways, that is still a dynamic that people
But how could people
live
not
through.
see that it's far worse for
one
kids
would
to
think.
live together with someone you hate?
Right.
And
Right. Staying together for the kids
You're right.
really is often causing more harm than good, of course.
Yeah.
Rationally, we know that. But this isn't necessarily rational. This is more of an emotional trigger for a lot of people. And I think it also has a lot to do for some people with the idea that if we get divorced, then we have to admit we failed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Which is also, I think, something that I would really invite people to rethink. To some degree, this is also an idea that Esther Perel has talked about. She and I have had conversations about this, where this idea of just because the relationship didn't, quote, go the distance,
right,
doesn't mean it was a failure.
Right.
For the time it lasted, it could have served its purpose. It could have been a great and wonderful experience. It's sort of like if the ride doesn't last longer or as long as you originally expected, does that mean it wasn't a good experience up until that point?
Did you have fun while it was going?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of that characterization as well. And that keeps people in there, which, again, I find incredibly ironic because we see this is happening also in the face of, in the last 20, 30 years, relationships in particular have become so disposable.
Yeah.
So throwaway, kind of like
Longer
microwaves.
than that, I think. Since divorce lost its stigma and became a huge thing.
All right, so yeah, maybe 40 years, over the last 4 decades or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the change. Right? Now, again, I want to also be very careful not to let that statement especially the way that sort of ended off, be fodder for people to continue to claim that the sexual revolution that was experienced in primarily the 70s, we like to say the 60s, but we define decades by the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? So it was really the very late 60s, but it was mostly the 70s. And there are people that are saying that by allowing, first of all, the birth control pill, allowing women to have access to birth control, this sort of lack of imperative to, get married and have a family, like that was what relationships were all about, that all of these changes that we experienced since the 70s are why we have abortion, why we have sex trafficking, why there's sexual abuse. I mean, every problem that we can identify associated with sex and sexuality, these people are saying is due to the sexual revolution.
Right.
Because before 1963, before the birth control pill, all married couples were wonderfully functional. They were very happy. They were loving. Nobody said a bad word to each other. Nobody raised a hand to each other. Life was wonderful. I mean, this is the America that people want to gain back again.
It's always been easier to blame sex. When we fear sex, we blame sex for all our problems. Right. And sure, it fits the narrative. Sex hysteria that's been going on for a lot longer than our lifetime.
Oh, absolutely. But what we have seen very much in our lifetime is this reaction. And particularly, and this is also nothing new, but this sort of reactionary, very defensive posturing that people just go right into and start thinking about these old biblical throwbacks. I remember it was early on, people talking about, Donald Trump and a lot of these other, conservatives, they want us to go back to the 50s. It's like, yeah, they're right, but they mean the 1650s.
Or the 50s like Mad Men, when, sexual abuse was considered normal, and women knew their place.
Women knew their place,
men could pinch a woman's bottom, a secretary in the office, and
that's right.
She had to laugh it off.
The good old days when women were property, when men could do whatever they want.
So, how many times over the years have we heard this like critical question? Why do you guys have to be so political? Right, like we made it political. Right, when sexual health is politicized, when sexuality is politicized. The outrage starts in again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's similar in a lot of different areas. I would agree. I would love to be able to talk about sexuality and sexual health in a non-political way, but it's impossible.
Yeah,
right?
And it's
Bill Clinton. Remember, he once said that politics ends at the schoolhouse door.
Yeah,
those days are over.
Sure, it starts up again at the bedroom door.
Right. But those days are over. I mean, politics follows you through every door you walk in now.
And could it ever be more invasive, right? Aren't conservative Republicans the ones that are always screaming for less government intrusion in people's lives?
Somebody needs to explain that irony.
Less government intrusion in people's lives, yet they want to intrude into women's uteruses.
And you know what? Even more than Republicans. And you're right, that is supposed to be what they were about, but libertarians.
Sure.
I mean, idiots like Rand Paul, who call themselves libertarians, then shut up about abortion, shut up about homosexuality
by definition,
and marriage.
You are pro-choice for everything.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Don't
no matter
tread
what
on
it
me.
is, no matter what it is, it could be homosexuality, it could be trans issues, it could be child porn, it could be legalization of drugs.
Right.
That's what a libertarian is.
Yeah.
Right? But now a libertarian is just code word for religious conservative.
Yeah. Oops.
Unfortunately. And again, we see in all of this throwback and all this reactionary stuff, again, wanting to go back. And this is what really, really, truly worries me about what's going on today, and particularly the forces that are sort of in power right now, that bringing us back to a time when women were even more marginalized, going back to reverse all this stuff. We were talking earlier. One of the things I definitely want to, we can look at this point right now, and this should scare people. Right?
You should outrage people.
The only people that
and
should
women,
find
why
comfort.
aren't women really pissed off?
But the only people that should find comfort in what Sessions is doing right now are the people we have to worry about with this Religious Liberty Task Force.
Oh,
right?
Yes. I've been wondering how much the religious liberties of Muslims and Jews are going to be protected by this task force.
Right.
I wonder if they have that in mind.
Right. How's the Muslim ban going to be affected by the Religious Liberty Task Force?
Or is this just the Department of Justice getting involved in the lack of separation between church and state and making sure the state serves its purpose of protecting the rights of the poor, downtrodden, persecuted white Christians?
Right. And that,
we're just so powerless in this country.
Exactly. They're being victimized. They're dying. They're constantly being prejudiced against.
So now the Attorney General has to make... And this is always the same old crap, like if not the baker who can't bring him or herself to put two little plastic grooms or little plastic brides on top of a cake.
Right. Or
but
the county clerk.
Like the pharmacist who refuses to fill a script for birth control because it goes against their Catholic views, or Plan B.
Absolutely.
Or even Mifeprex. Right? We went through this with the mystery shopper thing back in the end of our Planned Parenthood days, when pharmacists would literally tear up a script, which is like countermanding a doctor's order.
Yes, that's illegal.
And they should lose their license over something like that.
Right.
Or purposely taking a script and telling a woman, yeah, I don't have it in stock, but I'll call you when I get it. And holding it
outside
for 4
the window.
days, 5 days when it was too late.
Right. And again, this idea of who this is really for, right? And let's be real honest. And I want to speak directly to those people out there. It is not a violation of your religious liberty if somebody says you can't basically do whatever you want and treat people however you want because you're flying some banner that you're hiding behind called religion.
To justify prejudice.
That's all it is.
Hatred.
That's all it is. It's an excuse to be intolerant and hateful and bigoted and calling it religion. Right? What was it? I forgot who it was, what show it was, but I'm quoting the line here. Even though I don't remember the source, but if Jesus were alive, he'd slap your face.
Well, I don't think he'd be too happy at what people are doing in his name.
No, it really is ridiculous. And, and again, we're talking about an issue of privilege. And, that's become a word that people do cringe over, myself included, the way it's often used. But we can't ignore it or deny it. There is that white privilege. There is that white Christian privilege in particular. But there really is something that the Me Too movement also brought out that some of us have been talking about for a long time, but there really is male privilege.
Sure.
And we see that playing out in all kinds of areas. We see it playing out in relationships.
Well, even just
politics.
in sex. How often we talk about how many women think that pain is an expected part of sex, and how many guys could even fathom the idea that sex is painful.
Right. Well, it's hard for a lot of them to fathom it because they're the ones that are often causing the pain.
Right. Of course.
Right. It's
somebody's in the doghouse all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
well, hopefully you have some comfortable pillows. But I mean, it's hard to have a healthy relationship, when somebody is, quote, in the doghouse, when there is that unequal dynamic, and it becomes very parental.
Absolutely.
And I like
that's
what
we
you've said a number of times.
Time.
Right. We're wired to not be turned on by mommy or daddy.
That's the normal response. And when a partner is acting like that, that's the setup.
Right.
And not to bring it back to our favorite subject, but that's what the sex addiction approach freezes in time.
Well, sure.
Right? There's the bust. Oh my God, I busted him looking at porn. There's the diagnosis. Oh, of course you did. He's a porn addict. And there's that parent-child dynamic that will never change unless somebody fixes it. And sex addiction therapists don't do that.
Well, they can't, because that would undermine their entire concept
to,
and their
to
entire philosophy.
acknowledge that a relationship can go through a crisis and get back on track.
Right.
And be stronger and healthier
so
than
these
before.
sex addiction people are very heavily invested
Well, of
in
course.
keeping the pathology as the
You
relationship.
Can't, you can't sell the idea that you can be cured, because that way you're a patient forever.
That's right, and
You'll
you won't be giving me your
always
money.
be an addict until you'll always need therapy.
Exactly.
Well, isn't that convenient?
It really is. It's
Instead
a nice.
of thinking we're supposed to work ourselves out of a job as quickly as possible.
Right. Exactly.
To be unnecessary in our patients'
No,
lives.
that's they want that dependency. Right? But going back to the privilege thing, sometimes just interesting questions come up. Like if we really think about it, and especially the way we look at how most men kind of relate to it, you got to ask, what really is a penis for? We imbue it with all sorts of properties and qualities and characteristics.
Yeah.
But really, what is it for? Why is it that it's such a source of perceived power for men? Yet, I don't know that there is a more insecure, more fragile, weaker organ than a penis.
Well, it certainly is a pretty... Instead of, like we always say, an erection is not a barometer of how into it a guy is. But his penis often belies what, his mouth is saying.
Sure.
And there's truth sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's an interesting question. What is it
expand on that.
for?
Expand on that. What is the penis truth that a lot of men are unable to hide?
Well, sometimes it doesn't work if a guy's lying, right? Like, these guys that say, I lose my erection every time I try and have sex with my wife, and it never happens with my secretary.
Right, exactly. But it's not you, babe.
Yeah.
It's not you. It's me. Yeah, I'm tired.
But
an
it's
excuse.
more about guys' just obsession
Mm-hmm.
with, just earlier today, I heard a guy say that I lose my erection during sex, and therefore, see, the conclusion was already in his head.
Right.
I lose my
It's
erection,
the relationship.
and therefore I cannot satisfy my wife.
Mm-hmm.
I said, did you ask her if that's the make or break, if that's what satisfies her, or
doesn't
no,
matter.
We just go on the script,
right?
Just the assumption. I am my penis is me, and if it don't work, I don't work.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole masculinity is tied up in being big enough and hard enough and lasting long enough and being like those freaks in the porn.
So
otherwise, I'm a failure.
Right. So it kind of sounds like a lot of the relationship that men have with their penises is compensatory. It's a way of shielding or masking their own weakness.
Sure.
And the more a guy, and I'm going to use this earlier today, the more a guy kind of tries to weaponize his penis, use it as some kind of tool for dominance or to assert his privilege even, to me, all that says, and what you were just saying, is that's really a smokescreen for insecurity and weakness.
Sure. Guys should think of it as a toy, right? A toy that's attached with which to pleasure a partner. Mm-hmm. Instead of being threatened by toys. That's old classic that guys have been threatened by vibrators and dildos because, well, this should be the only toy you need. Well, use it more like a toy. Like we were saying last week, think about if you're partnered with a woman, think about how she would like to be pleasured instead of assuming that it's all just about the thrust and the pound and the back and forth. Without understanding that it's not about the vagina.
Right, and again, to use that same sort of idea, we don't really use toys. We play with toys. We share our toys. We use our toys to have fun.
Only the bad kids, the selfish ones that don't share their toys.
Okay, but even still, they could lock themselves in a room and play by themselves.
They're just getting off in or on their partners. They're not really with their partners. They're not sharing their toy.
Right, exactly. They're using their toy
because
on
they
their
think
partner.
that's what is expected of them.
Right. It's like I have a baseball bat. I'm just going to hit you with it. Instead of here you can have a ball, you can throw it, we can have this thing back and forth. And now we're having a game.
Right.
You're not really having much fun if I'm just hitting you with my stick. And that's kind of what sex is for a lot of people. For a lot of these guys.
There's a great image to wrap up with. We're going to get that signal soon.
Yeah, we got the 2-minute warning.
There was all this great politics that was going on, this crazy, crazy stuff. While all the real crazy stuff is happening out in the open, we need to spend some time next Monday talking about what the Trump administration is doing quietly behind the scenes, particularly as it pertains to stripping away sexual and reproductive health rights and access in some pretty scary, unprecedented ways.
Absolutely. And women in particular need to understand, and younger women in particular, because one usually not paying as much attention, but need to understand how close we are in this country to no longer having abortion rights or any reproductive freedoms.
Yeah. It started in our lifetime, and it may end in our lifetime, and that's just a scary thought. We used to be like, that'll never happen. Oh my God, that'll never.
No. We're so close, and people need to understand that elections do matter. And if nothing else, people need to get out there in August when there are special elections, in November, and get people who are not going to vote for Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
So we'll pick that up. We'll definitely have plenty to be outrageous about.
Thank you for joining us on Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Please tune in again next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock. Like us on Facebook. Please share. We need to spread the word, get some sponsors.
Yep. So have a wonderful night and a good week.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors.